Hello fellow survivors, what is the best region in the game? Well, that's what we're here to find out today. Which are the best regions to survive in long term? Now this is going to be a breakdown of all the regions in its current state as of Tales from the Far Territory Part 5, and we're talking about regions that are good for long-term survival. I did do a tier list earlier about which regions were the best spawns on I Lope. And I also made a point there, which I'll reiterate now. What we describe as a best region depends on what we mean, because there's differences between a region that you survive in versus a region you spawn in. It depends what your purpose is for that region. Are you staying there, spawning there, you're traveling through it? Are you hunting in it? What are you doing in that region? Today, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss all the possible regions in terms of their long-term survival. Which region is best in terms of staying put and surviving for a long time. And this assumes that you already have all the means to survive. So you have the best gear that gives you warmth, whether it's on Voyager or I Lope, and you have, weapons. So there's nothing you really need to get. We're just talking about that you are in a region and you're surviving in that region. And this list is going to be for all difficulties, because generally speaking, when you get to the late game, the difficulties kind of fuse together in terms of what the regions provide. There are of course difficulties between there are of course differences between difficulties. Like on Voyager there'll be more prey animals and less wolves, and on higher difficulties the world is warmer, so it's easier to fish, for example, without fire, and some other things like that. And of course on Misery there are some exceptions that don't apply to the other ones. But generally speaking, when we're talking about survival in a region, regardless of you playing on Voyager or Misery, there are certain resources available that will help you survive there in a harder or easier way. So therefore, this particular video, talking about the best regions to survive in long term, really applies, generally speaking, to all of the difficulties. And feel free to share your opinion and say if you agree or disagree. So we're going to make a tier list, and we're going to go through all of the different regions. We're not going to do the connector regions, including Transfer Pass, which I consider a connector region, even though you can spawn there. We can maybe do connector regions in a different video, but for now we're staying to the main regions, so to speak, and we're going to go through them. Now, the way that we evaluate whether a region is good for long-term survival boils down to more or less 5 main things, although there are other criteria as well. First of all, the region must have shelter in some form or another, something you can call a base, or at least one such location. It helps if this shelter has a workbench or a 6-hob stove, which makes cooking easier. There should ideally also be a cave nearby, or some sort of shelter that can help reduce cabin fever if your difficulty has cabin fever. There should be a possibility of fishing, because of scurvy. You can of course play without scurvy, but assuming you do play with scurvy, having the possibility to fish nearby is good, and a fishing hut is better than fishing holes because of the cover it provides. Then we're looking at nearby animals, where the best is the moose, just because of Misery mode, because on I Lope and below, hunting a bear nearby is great. It gives you so much food, and when you're cooking level 5, but on Misery, you can't really hunt bears and eat them because of the debuffs involved. So moose is better than bear, but having nearby bear is still good, because on all other difficulties, it will provide lots of food. And of course, you get the bear coat. So we're talking about availability of nearby animals. And then finally, whether there is coal nearby. On lower difficulties, that won't matter too much. You can just have sticks or whatever. But even on lower difficulties, it's nice to be able to grab some coal now and then, just to be able to start a hot fire on a cold day. And the higher you get in difficulties, the more cold matter. But it's not a major criteria. It's just something that helps, because coal is more valuable as a respawn thing than sticks. And then there's some smaller criteria as well we'll cover when necessary. And what we're going to do, we're going to go through the region in kind of like a territorial sense. So in the last video I did with tiers and spawns, I did them alphabetically. This time I'm instead going to follow the world map. We're going to start in the corner of the world and go through it with Ash Canyon, and going through more or less the neighboring regions all the way to the Far Territory, which we will do last. So we're going to start with Ash Canyon. So let's get to it, and let's try and rank these different regions. And it may surprise you that Generally speaking, most regions are actually pretty good for survival. There's only really one that's terrible, and there are some that are very good, but pretty much, as long as you, before you get into it, as long as you like the region you're in, doesn't matter where it ends up on this ranking list, you like that region, just stay there. Some people love Bleak Inlet. I think it's a great region to stay in, and other people hate it. So sometimes, regardless of the resources and criteria we set, it's just your own personal opinion, really. But anyway, let's get to it. Let's start ranking these things. First off, we have Ash Canyon. Ash Canyon is a little bit hard to choose where to put. My initial feeling is that this is an A tier. The reason being that there is quite a lot of resources here. It's arguably an S tier, but it's hard to say. Depends a bit where you choose your base. The most common one is Angler's Den. And at Angler's Den, you have a rabbit and deer nearby. There's a moose that's not too far away. Also, lots of birch bark, not that far away. There's a workbench in there. There's quite some coal in that wolf nest that's not too far. There's a fishing hut that's not too far. But notice how nearly all of this is like not too far away. In the immediate area near Angler's Den, there isn't really that much. You have to walk a little bit, and there's a load of wolves surrounded the cabin, which is not great. So the region has good stuff. The region has fishing, has moose and bears and ptarmigans and birch bark. A lot of good stuff in the region. But in terms of surviving near a base, Angler's Den is actually not that great, even though it's comfortable. Alternatively, if you took Foreman's Retreat up in the high ground, you actually have no predators except the bear, and there is the only bear in the region is there. And you get ptarmigans, and you get deer and rabbits fairly nearby. There's a cave that's not too far away across Miners Folly that you can use to cure cabin fever. There's a workbench, there's coal near the bear. But the problem with that part again, is that there's no fishing unless you make your way all the way down. And it's kind of far from everything, completely isolated in this small area. So Ash Canyon is a bit unusual in that it has a lot of good stuff, but it's kind of spread all over the place. And there isn't a base you can pick that is perfect. Even though Foreman Street is beautiful and relaxing, and Angler's Den has access to a lot of stuff, it's not S tier in my opinion. It's an A tier because of that, but it's still a good region. Then we have Timberwolf Mountain, and Timberwolf Mountain is, in my opinion, a very clear, perhaps the clearest S tier on this list. It's very good for long-term survival because it has pretty much everything you need near Timberwolf Mountain. Mountaineer's Hut. So the Mountaineer's Hut is arguably the best base in the game, and there's a reason for that. If you have a moose in that region, some of these criteria depend on whether or not the moose is nearby, by the way, so it depends on the run. But you can have a moose like right outside the cabin, which is great. There's potentially two bears that are not far, so it's not far to go to kill two bears. There's deer and rabbit just outside the cabin, pretty much. Ptarmigans are not too far. You got to go a little bit higher in elevation, but it's not really that far. And whether there's ptarmigans or not, it's not really a big deal. They're just like a different kind of rabbit, like broth, but it's not really that important. There's a fishing hut right outside. There's some coal in some of the tunnels, like Ravine Cave. The coal is a little bit further, but it's not a big deal. There's a cave not too far away that you can go to, where there's potential moose spawn. So it has everything, really. If it was like S+, it would also have a 6-hub stove and that sort of thing. And also, of course, the main drawback really of Mountaineer's Hut is that it's technically an outdoor building. It does count as indoors, but because it's broken at the roof, which you can't fix, just watch a video by Archimedes to see how you can fix it, although it doesn't do anything to the actual building. But it can be cold. So if you have good gear, you can treat Mountaineer's Hut as just any other interior base. But if you don't, it can get cold. But other than that, that location is fantastic. The rest of Timberwolf Mountain doesn't really matter because that's too stretched out. It's kind of like a hand from Mountaineer's Hut. There are other places you can stay, but they are weak by comparison. But Mountaineer's Hut is a fantastic base and probably the best base you can get in the game, in my opinion. Moving on to Blackrock Mountain. This one is not great. It's difficult to say where to place this. Depends a little bit on how you treat it and where you stay. But I would say it's a D tier. And this this map was also on the D tier on the spawn list, so it's not looking too good. It depends a little bit how you choose it, because there's many places you can have a base. Let's talk about two of them. Let's say you choose Bricklayer's Retreat, which is kind of like Mountaineering's Hut, but in Blackrock. And let's say you do have a moose outside of it, then it's pretty good. It's warm-ish. If you have good gear, you can stay warm there. There's a moose outside. There's deer not far. There's a workbench. The transition cave to Blackrock, to Timberwolf Mountain isn't far, so you should be able to get some coal. And there's also a cave not far, so you can. It's all right if you go by just that and you have the moose. That's probably like a B or something like that, I guess. But there's some problems. There's timber wolves everywhere. The moose isn't guaranteed to be there, of course, and there's no fishing. In fact, there's no fishing in the entire region, as far as we're aware anyway. So that's a bit of a drawback. I don't think there's any birch bark either in Blackrock Mountain as a whole, which is not great, or very little of it. So it's not amazing, but if we went by just Bricklayer's Retreat, it probably is still like a B-ish, maybe, B or C. Let's say instead your base is the prison. You could have a moose outside the prison. The problem with the prison is it doesn't have a great area to be your base. Most people, including myself, use the guardhouse, but there's very little space in there. There is, of course, the nearby workbench, which is protected by wolves. There's rabbits. There's a possible bear in the prison. So let's say you do have the bear and the moose, then it's not so bad. There's no coal nearby. There's wolves everywhere, and there's fishing limitations as well. So it's one of those places that, like, it's not great. You're going to get scurvy eventually, basically, and there's limited hunting. But it's okay. You could make an argument that it's a C tier, especially because there's definitely a lot of wolves, so you're not going to go hungry, and you do get a moose and bear. So it's possible, but there are a lot of issues with it. I guess we can be kind. Let's give it a C rather than a D, because you do have bear and moose in both of those locations that I just mentioned, and there's a possibility of moose. You do have workbench. Yeah, it's all right. There's some drawbacks here with lots of wolves, timber wolves, no fishing, and just not a lot of stuff around, really. So it's not great, but I think we'll put it C rather than D. Okay, moving on to Pleasant Valley. This one is also a bit hard to put. It's either an A or an S tier. Let's put it in A for the moment and think about it for a second. So again, it depends on where we choose as a base, and by far the most common one is the farmstead. And there's a lot of good stuff about the farmstead. It has a 6-hub cooking stove, so you can cook lots of stuff very easily. It has a workbench. There's a bear not far away. There's a moose not too far, although it depends on where it is, but even regardless of where the moose spawns, it's not that far away. Fishing is a little bit far away. It is possible to fish in a river, but only in certain parts. Birchbark's not too far away, but there's also lots of wolves around, and there's no real coal or anything. Caves are a little bit of a journey, unless you use the bear cave. So it's okay. It's probably like an A here, that base. It's pretty good, pretty popular. But if you use Thompson's Crossing instead, you also have a 6-hub stove. There is also a moose not too far, assuming it spawns in the birch forest. But if not, it spawns in the pond, Pensive Pond, which also isn't that far. And you can also fish there. There's a bear not that far. Some of these are possible spawns, but let's just assume you have those spawns. There's deer and rabbit not far. Coal isn't far because Cinder Hills Mines is there. And birch bark, of course, in birch forest. There's no workbench though on Thompson's. So this is a bit hard. It's kind of like between S and A. I'm not sure exactly. It's a big bonus that it has these 6-hub stoves that have lots of cooking. And there's quite a lot of animals if you include the wolves, and there's deer not far in the open areas. A lot of people don't like Pleasant Valley. They feel like there's a lot of blizzards and stuff, and it's kind of hard to navigate. So it depends a little bit how you see it. One limitation is there's only really one place to fish, and it's not very close to the base. So if you compare it to Timberwolf Mountain, it's not as good, but it's close. So I think I'm going to put this in A tier. The minor nuisance to fish and also moose not being too close is a problem, but a minor one. And one has a workbench but surrounded by wolves and far from coal. Everything is kind of like a little bit far but not too far. It's like a comfortable region that has most of the things you need without being fantastic, if that makes sense. I would say it's an A. Moving on to Coastal Highway, we're going through the Cinder Hills mines, and you end up in Coastal Highway. This one is difficult. Some people's going to put this as D. Some people's going to put it as S. They absolutely love it. I think it's somewhere between B and C. Let's put it as C for now, but I'm pretty sure we're going to put it as B because it's better than Blackrock Mountain, but we'll see. It depends a little bit. The good thing about Coastal Highway is it's very easy to navigate because it's open, but not so open that it's easy to get lost, and the side areas are pretty easy to navigate too. A lot of the stuff in Coastal Highway is very predictable, and there are some good base options. By far the most common one is the garage, where you do have a workbench. Fishing huts are not far. You could have a moose spawn there. There's also a bear not far away. There's some rabbit and coal and deer. There's no coal though nearby. The closest will be Cinder Hills Mines, which is a little bit of a walk away. There's a load of wolves around as well. And one of the major problems with Coastal Highway is that there's no caves. So there's no cave you can go to sleep in to cure cabin fever. Not even bears have caves in this map. They just have their own little bear cave thing, like mini caves. So if you got cabin fever, the only way to cure it would be to go to a fishing hut and sleep there. That would be the best way to do it. So that's a minus. There are some other options for bases. There's the island bases, but the island bases are kind of far from everything. They're only really good for fishing and some deer hunting, that sort of thing. And there's no workbenches there. You could stay in the fishing huts, which I often use as a base. And here you have an outdoor workbench. It's very close to a fishing hut. It's like right outside of one. There's a bear that roams nearby. And there's some deer and rabbits not far either. So that's a pretty good base, really. There are some problems with it though. Again, coal is pretty far away, but that's not a major thing. But it helps with fishing, of course. There's also no caves again to cure cabin fever, although you could just do that by fishing, so it's not a big deal, I guess. You can also get disturbed in that base a lot because you're very close to both wolves and bears. It's very common to go out and do something at the workbench on that base, and then a bear shows up. That's a bit annoying. So it's a good region, but it has some drawbacks, like there's no caves. There's only there's 2 bears, 1 possible moose, lots of wolves everywhere, and but some people will rate this higher for sure. I think B is fine. It's an okay region for long-term survival. But again, all of these regions you can survive it forever, assuming you have the gear and stuff. Blackrock Mountain, because there's no fishing, is going to be problematic. But ignoring that, all regions are good if you just like that region. Then moving on to Desolation Point. This one is interesting. Some people don't like it. They zoom out of there. And in fact, when I said this was a spawn region, I think I put it as a C. But as a long-term survival, I think it might actually be an A. Now, some of this depends on the moose spawn. So there's different bases you can have, like Lighthouse or Riken. I think most people use Hibernia, though. And if they're not, then they use Riken. Which either is fine. But the good thing, let's say you are in Hibernia. Well, in Hibernia, you have a workbench. There's load of possibilities of ice fishing. You don't have a fishing hut though, but ice fishing is fine. There's a moose. Let's say you do have the moose spawn. The moose spawn is on the bridge, really close. There's 1 bear only, which is also very close. And then there's rabbit and deer and ptarmigans not too far away. there's load of places for coal because there's a connector mine and then another mine leading out of Desolation Point and then Scruffy's Cave. And there's a forge as well. So it has everything you need. And there's beachcombing. That's something Coastal Highway has also, a small bonus for that. But I still think that's a B. But Desolation Point also has beachcombing. So that's it's pretty good, really. One minor drawback is that the only cave you can use to cure cabin fever if you get it is the bear cave, really. So you have to kill the bear first, so that's the problem. And of course, another thing is that the region is very small. So if you kill the bear and the moose, then you've done the two major parts, and then you are kind of finding a hard time to keep going. If you've seen my Stalker series, I actually stay in Desolation Point. I spawned there and I stayed there for a long time, and I loved it. I loved staying. I felt like I stayed there forever. But in that run, I killed the bear and the moose very early, and in the early game, the respawn rate's pretty fast. But in the late game, it's pretty slow. So let's just say, for sake of argument, say you kill the bear on day 1 and the moose on day 2. You might have to wait like 50 plus days before they come back. In the meantime, you can do some fishing, hunt wolves, hunt deer, hunt rabbits, do some crafting. But you're kind of like, what should I do? I'm not sure. The only way out, the only thing to do other than faffing about in there is to go out of the region. While say in Timberwolf Mountain, once you leave Mountain Assault, you've got a lot of places you can go and do other stuff. You can go set up ropes, you can explore caves, you can go into Ash Canyon if you want to grab a bunch of birch bark and come back, or same with Pleasant Valley. You have so many more options in Timberwolf Mountain. So this is like a Timberwolf Mountain light. I think it is a pretty good region, and I could stay there forever, but I think it's just not good enough to be S tier. Okay, then we have Mystery Lake, everyone's favorite. Most people have played this game the most by far, and this is a great region. It depends a little bit on where we put it. It's just by popularity alone, it's probably S tier, but it's somewhere between S and A. Let's put it in A for the moment and think about it for a minute. Now, first, where's your base? There's multiple places you can have it as a base, but by far, most people have trappers or camp office. And again, throughout this video, let's just say that all the spawns work in your favor. You do get the bear and the moose spawn where you want it, right? In trappers, you have a workbench, you have a bear spawn nearby. It is possible to have a moose there too, which is great, but that moose is rare, doesn't show up very often. There's deer and rabbits nearby, plus wolves, of course. There's coal in the nearby cave, but there are a couple drawbacks to it. First off is that there's no nearby cave in trappers that you can use to cure cabin fever. So if you had cabin fever, you have to trek up to probably Lake Overlook Cave, I guess is the best one. So that's not nearby. And same with fishing. There isn't any fishing. You can, I believe, fish in Unnamed Pond. I can't remember for sure from the list. But even so, it's not like right there. So it's not S tier, but it's okay, you know. Camp office is arguably slightly better. I used to be married to Trapper's Cabin, but Camp office is arguably a little bit better. Because Camp office also has a workbench. It has a bear not far from it, a little bit further than Trapper's, but still pretty close. It has rabbits, deer, and ptarmigan very close. Fishing is right there. A cave is right there. So that's pretty good. So especially in terms of long term and fishing, because of scurvy, it's very good. There are some drawbacks though. The moose is further away in the camp office potentially. However, usually when you do have a moose spawn in Mystery Lake, it tends to be in that Unnamed Pond or the dam. If it's in the dam, the camp office is closer than Trappers. If it's Unnamed Pond, it's the same as Trappers. So that kind of cancels each other out. Of course, in Trappers and camp offices, the forge isn't too far. If you're going to go to Forlorn Muskeg as well, it's another thing. There's no real coal nearby though in camp office either. Yeah, so it's okay like that. It's not a bad spawn at all. One thing that Trappers has that camp office doesn't have is that Trappers has the magic bed. The bed in Trapper's cabin give you 5% extra healing when you sleep. So it's actually the best bed in the game for healing. So that gives an advantage as well. But you can see like it's both of these bases are very good, but they're not perfect. Like you have to travel a little bit to get some things like moose and that sort of thing. So they are pretty good, but not amazing. So for that reason, I think this is an A tier and not S tier. It does have everything you need in this region, but it's spread around. So there isn't a base that's like perfect, but there are bases that are very good. But one argument that you could make to say that this is an S tier and not an A tier is if you consider the region in terms of its connection to other region. Mystery Lake is arguably the best region in the game in terms of connection and travel to other things. It's more or less just 2 regions away from everything. If you want to go to Timberwolf Mountain, yeah, go to Pleasant Valley and then in Timberwolf Mountain. And then it's Ash Canyon or Blackrock. You know, you're going to Desolation Point, yeah, it's just Coastal Highway and then Desolation Point. Want to go to Broken Railroad, Forlorn Muskeg, Broken Railroad. And then same with Ashbury Valley. Everything is like 2 or 3 regions away. Except for far territory, obviously. Even that's not that far away. So it connects to everything. So if you're talking about connecting to other regions, you can argue that it's an S tier, but then we're not really talking about surviving in the region, are we? We're talking about like adventure aspect of the region. So I think it's not really fair to use that as an argument in this case, but it could easily be put as S, but it is an A in my and arguably it's weaker than Desolation Point, but maybe not. It's hard to say. Okay, then we have Forlorn Muskeg. This one is hard to classify. Arguably, I say it's C. It's better than Blackrock Mountain. But there's a problem with Forlorn Muskeg, which is the same as Blackrock Mountain. As far as we know, you cannot fish in Forlorn Muskeg, and that's a problem. There are some good things overall with it, like you have, especially Spencer's Farm is a good base because you have a workbench and it's actually outdoors, so cabin fever is not going to be an issue. And there's a bunker nearby you can use as well, which will provide you an indoor safety haven if you want. There's deer and rabbits around. Bear isn't far. The moose can be far from that area though, so it's not the best one. The moose tend to spawn to the north of the map. And there's a lot of coal in some caves nearby, so that's pretty good. But just regardless of where you base, it's just not fantastic because there's no fishing in the region. The moose can be far away. There's very few buildings that give shelter, although there are some caves. And there's thin ice everywhere that makes it very dangerous to traverse. And if you go out in fog, you're just going to get lost. You could argue that, let's say your base was actually in the Marsh Ridge indoor cave, that connected cave, then you could have a moose on that plateau, and there's lots of birch bark there, and there's deer and rabbit and ptarmigans. There's a bear just underneath you potentially, so it's not too far for that either, and that's pretty good. But again, there's no fishing, there's no there's no workbench. But you could of course then go into Mystery Lake and fish there. So if you actually pick your base to be on Marsh Ridge, you do actually have most of the things you want, and that's pretty good. But you are then completely dependent on your bedroll, which eventually will break. There's no cloth to be found there, and you're dependent on a nearby region to survive as well. So, and who camps there? Like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone ever set up a base in that area, even though you could do it. So for Forlorn Muskeg, like it's kind of like you could argue it's maybe a B, maybe, but I'm going to put it as C. But I do like Forlorn Muskeg. I think Rand Alpha has Forlorn Muskeg as his favorite region. And if you want to challenge yourself, there is something called the Keg Stand, which is to survive 50 days in Forlorn Muskeg. It's the same as the Escape from Challenge, survive 50 days in any region. But Forlorn Muskeg is unique. It's called Keg Stand because of the lack of buildings and not many beds, and all these caves and thin ice and so on. So it's a great region. I really like Forlorn Muskeg, but as a long-term survival, it's not great. Maybe it's B, but I think it's C. Better than Blackrock Mountain, though arguably, just because it has birch bark. That's pretty much the only region. And it doesn't have Timberwolves, you know. Okay, then we have Mountain Town. Mountain Town is also a bit hard to classify. It's either a B or an A. Let's put it in B for now and see if it upgrades. So there are some good stuff here. One is, let's say your base is in Greymother's house. Then you have a 6-hub store, which is great. You have a deer and rabbit, not far. But other than that, you don't have much. There's a load of wolves around. There's no workbench. There used to be a workbench, but they patched it out. The moose is not too far away if it spawns in near Milton. The bear is a bit further. And coal is also quite far. So it sounds like a good place initially, but then you realize there's not much really to it. Let's say instead your base is Paradise Farm. It's a little bit better. It also has a 6-hub stove. But there's rabbits, there's ptarmigans, there's wolves, there's deer. The bear, though, is pretty far away. The moose can be far-ish away. It's either not that far as a Milton or it's down the ropes. Then you have to kill it and drag it back up again. And if you go to this birch bark, same with fishing, you have to go to the basin for that, I think. At least I think so. And there's no real nearby coal. So there are some drawbacks to it, but it's probably a better base than Paradise Farm. Then, of course, you also have Milton Basin. And Milton Basin is great if you want to practice long-term outdoor survival, because it's kind of like Desolation Point in size. But there's a cave there. If you have a bedroll, you stay in that cave. You never get cabin fever. There's a moose spawn there. There's rabbits and deer and wolves. You can fish. There's birch bark. And this coal isn't too far if you hop into Forlorn Muskeg, I guess. Although that's, not that region. There's no workbench, though, or anything like that. So you're completely outdoors, but you got everything you need. So all of those bases in Milton, they all have some sort of major drawback, which arguably by itself, I would say makes it a B1. However, one can make the argument, which I think I will do, that it is an A tier because if you connect all of these options together, it transforms into an A tier because you have everything you need between them, in the sense that, like, let's say Paradise Meadows is your main area, right? And then you go up and kill the moose and the bear. Then you are very close to the trailers nearby, so you can just stop there and sleep in those beds and maybe even cook on the fire barrel outside, go to Greymother's house after, and then to Paradise. You have kind of like 2 bases that both have 6-hub stoves, which is great. And then you can go to Milton Base and just hang out there for a while, hunt the moose if it's there, get birch bark. So there's a lot of the thing with Milton is that if you take individual bases, I'd say it's probably a B. But if you take all the options you have together, it gives you a lot of things to do and a lot of options to choose from. And so there's a lot of things you can do in that region, and I think that lifts it to an A in my opinion. It's probably a weak A though. As you can see, this list is a lot more positive than the other one. Then we have Hushed River Valley. Now, in my previous video, you might remember I said Hushed River Valley is by far the best region in the game to spawn in. Arguably on any difficulty, I guess. But it depends. If you spawn on lower difficulties, yeah, you could just choose Timberwolf Mountain and summit right away. But on Interloper, it is by far the best spawn. But for long-term survival, not necessarily. Long-term survival is a little bit hard, but I would say it's probably a B tier. The reason is there's no real indoor locations. So there is one, a bunker, but it's in a really awkward place. You're not going to set a base there. It's really awkward to access because it's by Lonely Cave. You don't really want to set up a base there. There is a second base, which is the Tails bunker, but this assumes you have done the Tails. But let's say for the sake of argument, you have done the Tails. Then you can set up shop in that bunker, in which case that's by the Stair Steps Lake. And that means you have access to deer and rabbits. There's a workbench there. There's caves not far for cabin fever. There's a bear not too far, really. And there's also fishing. You can fish in that, on that lake, I'm pretty sure. So that's pretty good, actually. The moose, though, is pretty far. It's either in the basin or Monolith Lake, so it's kind of in awkward positions. So for Misery, it's not as great. And yeah, there's coal, some coal, I guess. If you don't have access to that bunker, then you have to pick one of the caves, and there's multiple to choose from. But let's just say you pick the one that's like near Monolith Lake, where the close to one of the entrances to the ice caves, for example. It doesn't really matter which one you pick, but that one has a bear nearby, as well as deer and rabbits and ptarmigans. There's coal nearby, but moose is awkward. It's either up or down. Fishing is a little far, but not too bad. There's no workbench, though. There's some birch, but very little. And the region is, as a whole, is a bit hard to know what to do. But you do have everything you need, though. So you could make an argument it's an A tier. It's definitely not an S, that's for sure. But it could be an A. But I'm going to put it in B because it has a few options for like shelter and that. You have to use your bedroll most of the time. So there's no fixed beds except for like one or two, I guess, if you have tails. The moose is very awkward because it will always spawn in a position that's awkward. Like if in Milton Basin, if the deer is in Milton Basin, you're not going to set up your main base in Milton Basin. You kill the deer, some wolves and deer and rabbits there, but then you got to climb out of it, and it's awkward. If you get stumped and don't have a stim, you're stuck basically. If you go by Monolith Lake, you could fish there probably, and you have the moose, but then you don't have much else. So it's all right. I love Hushru. I think it's a great region. I want to put this as B, but as A, but I think it is a B. That being said, I will tell you one thing though about Hushru Valley. If there's one region that I highly recommend that you do try to survive in long term, it is Hushru Valley, especially if you play Interloper, but low difficulties too. Because Hushru Valley is one of those regions, it has a lot of stuff going for it when you explore it, but most people don't want to go to Hushru Valley. It's too hard to navigate, there's too many obstacles, it's hard, it's very difficult to do, but there's so much to discover in Hushru Valley. There's a load of good loot with the signal fire, and in the ice caves, there's caches hidden all over the place. There's really cool routes you can take. Design-wise and exploration-wise, Hushru Valley is a great region. For just that, I would put it in S. So if it's one region you haven't learned, I highly recommend you take like 30 or 50 days and just explore Hushru Valley. Just explore it and learn that map, because it will do you a favor in the long run. You will become a better Long Dark player if you know Hushru Valley. That's pretty much what I'm getting at. But as a standalone region for just long-term survival, it's like a B, maybe an A. Well, I think it's like a B plus, I guess. Then we have Bleak Inlet, and Bleak Inlet is probably a C, I would say. Maybe a B. It depends. So it depends on where you base. So let's say you pick Cannery, which is probably the worst thing to do ever. Because Cannery has not much going for it. It has a workbench, but it's hard to access this workbench because you have to take this whole obstacle course every time, unless you use one of those cheesy shortcuts that you can do. And even to get there, you have to get the Aurora Code, and you have to kill Fluffy inside, potentially, the Indo Wolf. There's fishing nearby, there's rabbits nearby. Deer is not too far. Moose isn't too far if it's by the washout trailer, and bear isn't too far. All this is like nearby, it's not in the cannery, and there's constant Timberwolves. They will respawn all the time, and there's no coal. So I would never have a base in the cannery. The cannery is always, to me, a pit stop. I will leave some resources there. I'll come back to it now and then, because the good thing about the cannery is that it does have the ammunition workbench and the milling station that allows you to create bullets and also repair tools. But that alone does not justify it as a long-term base. It's one of the worst bases you can choose. It's a place you visit, you don't stay there. But Blackrock Mountain They also have a milling machine and ammunition workbench, but that base is better. So of these two, for that argument, Blackrock is actually better than Bleak Inlet. But let's continue. Let's say instead you pick workers' residence nearby, which is a cabin. Then you have a bear very close. This is a bit better. There's a bear nearby. There's a deer not too far. There's rabbits nearby. There's a fishing hut right outside, which is great. There's a cave not too far, although that's a bear cave. There's a 6-hub stove, actually, if you use the lighthouse, although I think I've ever actually done that, but you can do it. There's a moose not too far if you go to the washout trailer, but if you don't, then it's pretty far away. There's no workbench, though. That's a problem with this whole region, really. There isn't a workbench except in the cannery. The birch, there might actually be one in the tails bunker, now that I think about it. I think that might have a workbench. Yeah. Then there's birch is pretty far, and there's Timberwolves everywhere. So, but if you do stay in workers' residence, we could maybe make the argument that this is a bee spawn, a bee region, just because in workers' residence you do have the fishing hut, you have a nearby bear, there's some animals not too far, and there's beachcombing as well. There is access to a 6-hub stove. And you do have birch and that not far. There's birch bark. There's one thing that we could say. There is one argument that we can make to make actually Bleak Inlet a B rather than a C. Okay, ready for this? Bleak Inlet is unique in that it has 3 moose spawns, and all 3 can be active at the same time. You can have a moose at the washout trailer, you can have a moose in the birch forest and near the birch forest, and you can have all 3 in the same run. You can kill 3 moose in 3 days. It has happened, and it's not unusual. The Timberwolves are an absolute annoyance, but you can just get rid of them with fire. So if you can control Timberwolves, then you have access to 3 moose, 1 bear, fishing, rabbits and ptarmigan, and ice and beachcombing. And if you go by that alone, this is arguably better. It is actually a B tier rather than C, even though most people will never go there. I did a survey a while ago, and I think it said 25% of players will never go to this region, and the other 20, and then like another 25% will go if they're prepared or something like that. Yeah, so this is better for that region. The reason it is arguably a B. It is on par with Coastal Highway. I would say Coastal Highway is a bit better. Ashbury Valley is kind of in between. It's hard to say which is the best one of these. Probably Coastal Highway is the best. Okay, so yeah, there you go. All right, moving on to the last one before the Far Territory, Broken Railroad. This is kind of like Desolation Point, and I would say this is an A tier. It's a really cool region, especially if you have the hunting lodge. By the way, I don't know if I said earlier, but it should be apparent. We're not going by what loot is in the region, because this is long-term survival. So it doesn't matter what the loot is. If you found a hammer or expedition parker or whatever, it doesn't make a difference. We're just going to assume that you get to these regions to survive it and you already have everything you need. So the loot doesn't matter. The resources matter. Okay, so here there's really just 2 good bases. It's the maintenance yard and the hunting lodge. Now, if you choose the maintenance yard, you have a moose and bear spawn potentially pretty close. Deer and rabbits are not far either. There's fishing nearby if you fish on the lake. There's a workbench and a forge, which is great. There isn't really any coal, though, nearby that respawns that gives you forging opportunities. There's a cave not too far, but there's lots of wolves everywhere. But it's not a bad base. It's alright. You can get electrocuted in the base, though, because of the cave wolves. But Hunting Lodge is one of my favorite bases in the game, if you have the moose spawn, and a lot of people feel the same way. In the Hunting Lodge, you can have a moose spawn right outside your door. And if you don't, you always have deer spawn instead. There's also wolves. And the bear is also very close. It's just that it's beneath you, so you have to climb down. But it is right there, and it's not that far to bring it back up. There's rabbits and stuff close to. Ptarmigans are not far. And you have a 6-hub stove. There's also fishing, of course, in the lake. You got to get down to the lake, though, so it's not Because of that, it's not S tier. So it has almost everything you need right outside the cabin, if you have a moose especially. And everything else is pretty close. So hunting is fantastic. The region though is very small. You run into the same problem as Desolation Point. What are you going to do once you kill those things? So it's harder to maintain your sanity in those regions. But it's still pretty good. It's a good region. Then let's do the far territory. We'll start with Forsaken Airfield. This one is hard to say, but I would say it's a B. I do love Forsaken Airfield. I think it is. It was my favorite DLC region until Sundered Pass. I actually think I prefer Sundered Pass, but I like the design of Forsaken Airfield better than Sundered Pass. I really like Forsaken Airfield because it's so vast and flat and dangerous. And I love that design. It's like Pleasant Valley, but in turbo. A lot of people hate that, but I think it's a great design. It's really, really nice that they did that. But in terms of long-term survival, let's think about it, right? Most people will have the airport as their base. And the airport has some benefits. As a forge, as workbench, it's the only place, I think, that gives you safety from glimmer fog, if that happens. But you have to go down and it's dark there, so you have to have a renewable light source, so you're going to use a match every time you go down there in the basement. And that's good. And then you have, deer and rabbits are not far away. The moose is potentially not too far. But other than that, like the bear is pretty far away. There's wolves all over the place. There's no coal really in this region. Not really. And the terrain is dangerous. It is so dangerous, this region. Once you leave the airport and you go out, oof, it's beautiful because it's so big and wide and open. But once the fog hits or the blizzard, you can get turned around and you have no idea where to go. Even the most experienced player will get lost. So that makes it really dangerous. So the airport is all right. A lot of space, which is good, but it doesn't have that much going for it in terms of renewable resources. The island cottage, though, that's not too far away. The island cottage also has a workbench. There's a cave not too far away if you're in your cabin fever. Fishing is very close with the fishing huts. Rabbit and deer is not too far. They tend to be on the ice. The bear is also on the ice, so it's not too far. The moose is a little bit further, but it's not terrible, especially with the sled. It's all flat, so it's pretty easy to ride back. There's no coal, although the cave to Zone of Contamination isn't far, so you can get some coal there. The island cottage is not bad. You can get by pretty well in island cottage, I think. So I think those things combined makes this a B spawn. We're not talking about the aesthetics of the regions or anything like that. And if you ask me what is my personal favorite, the list would look different. And I can do that if you like one day. If you're interested, I'm happy to make one of these. It'd be much shorter, I think. Maybe not. But I'm happy to make a list that's just my favorite regions and why I like them, irrespective of how good they are. That's a completely different story. That's a subjective thing, not an analysis. So yeah, this is a beat. It's got everything you need. It does, but it's the bases are all lacking something, and the terrain as a whole is very dangerous, and it's just a hard region to survive in. I love it though. It's a great region. I would love to put this as A, but I don't think it is an A. It's a B. Then we have Zone of Contamination, and Zone of Contamination arguably is the only region that belongs in the D here. You can survive there, no problem, but it's a pain in the butt. As a spawn, it's not that bad. Of course, if you spawn there, you got a lot of gear in the mine especially. But if you want to live long term, let's think about where is your base first? Well, you got some options. Most people choose Idle Camp or Langston Mine. You could choose one of the caves further in though, or the trailer, I suppose. But there's some options, but most people choose those. But let's talk about Idle Camp first, right? Idle Camp has some good stuff going for it in the sense it has a 6-hub stove. And that's it. Right? If you think about the camp, right? You have a 6-up stove. There's some deer nearby and rabbits and ptarmigans. But then, let's say you get cabin fever. A cave to cure it in is kind of far away. I think the closest is actually the one near the entrance of the region. Coal is not far. If you need coal, you can just go into the mines. It's not too bad. But there's no workbench in Idle Camp. There's poisoned wolves everywhere. There's chemical crap all over the place. The moose is pretty far away. I think there's only one spawn for the moose, and it's all the way down the river. The bear is also there. The bear is really far away. And fishing in this region is like almost non-existent. You can fish in this region, which technically it does make the region better than both of these. And if you go by fishing alone and scary alone, I guess on paper it's a B region. But because there's only one place you can fish really, and it's on the what is it called? Some excavated whatever, that little lake they got where the pipes run out. You can fish there with ice fishing. It is possible. So in theory you could survive here and cure scurvy and all that stuff. But all the resources are so far away. Same thing in Langston Mine. You do have a workbench there. Fishing is a bit closer, I guess. Then everything else is far away. And you have the bear is far away. The moose is far away. The wolves don't give you any meat. I don't know if you knew this, but if you kill a poisoned wolf, they do not give any meat. So you can't live off that. And the mine itself has gas, of course. The whole region as a whole is a good region. The region is very cool. It's got unique design elements to it. It's a really cool region. So if we're talking about whether the region is cool or not, it's not a detail. But for survival, the main animal in the region doesn't give you any resources because they don't have meat. There's one bear and it's far away. There's one moose and it's also far away. There's only one place to fish. You could set up base in a cave so that the bear and the moose are kind of close and the fishing's not too far. And then there's very little chemical stuff around. So yeah, if you go into the wilds especially, you can kind of treat it like Hush River Valley, and then it's not too bad. But yeah, it's a rough one to stay in long term. Can you survive? Yes, you can survive forever. All of the regions, more or less, you can survive forever. But it's just, yeah. If you go by only whether you can survive forever, then Blackrock Mountain is the worst one, followed by Forlorn Muskeg, and then Sundered Contamination. Just because Forlorn Muskeg has birch bark at least, and Sundered Contamination has fishing. So this, if you go by only your availability to survive indefinitely, Blackrock Mountain's the worst. This is the second worst. Sundered Contamination is the third worst, and then the rest is arbitrary. But we're not going by that. We're going by all available resources. So yeah, that's a detail, I would say. Okay, and then finally we have the Sundered Pass. I really like Sundered Pass. It's a great region. When I first played, I was like, wow, I did not expect it to look like it does. Pretty cool region. Where do we put it? Probably it's a C tier, I would say. The reason it's a C tier is that it does technically have everything you need, but there's so many obstacles to it to kind of survive long term because everything has a drawback. You could maybe say it's a B tier. Let's talk about it. So first of all, where's your base? Well, you have options. Some bases are pretty cool. You could have like the Tails ending building as your base, but where do you want to stay? Well, realistically, there's really just 2, maybe 3 bases. So let's say your base is the last lonely house on the lower level. So this region has 2 levels, upper and lower, and that makes a difference. Lower levels has the last lonely house, which has a workbench. It also has a bed, but only if you do the Tails. If you don't, there's no bed there. There's nearby deer and rabbits. Ptarmigan's not too far away, I guess. There's a cave nearby for cabin fever. But on that level, there's no bear. There's no moose, at least I'm aware of. And I don't think there's any fishing, although someone told me you can fish on that little lake nearby, in which case that's all right, yeah. But yeah, it's okay. There's not much going for it there. There's no major prey or animals or anything like that. Yeah, but it's okay, I guess. The other place would be the final refuge, all the way at the top of the map, the last cabin you can find. And this actually has a lot going for it, because right outside this cabin, there is a bear, there is a moose, and there's fishing, which is fantastic. That's great. There's also ptarmigans and rabbits really not far away. There's no deer though. I think you have to go to lower levels for deer. I don't think there's any deer at all at the upper levels, unless I missed one. Very few at least. But there are timberwolves, lots and lots and lots of timberwolves, and that's a major drawback. Another drawback is that it's really cold, because this region is unique that the higher you go, the colder it gets. And another issue, and this is really the main one, that in my opinion makes this a C spawn or C region and not a B region. There's really no firewood on the upper levels. So the lower levels has a load of firewood, and that's deer and rabbits and stuff. But there's no major stuff there. There's no fishing hut, there's no bear, there's no moose. Upper levels has a fishing hut and bear and moose, but no firewood. Why? Because on high altitudes like that, the trees just don't grow. So there are some sticks here and there, but for the most part, there's no firewood in this region at the top. And that makes it really hard to survive if you're dependent on cooking and fire and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's not great. It possibly is a B tier. I would say it's probably weaker than Bleak Inlet and Forsaken Airfield. Although you could make the claim that you just stay in Final Refuge, you know, and fish and hunt the moose, but I don't know. It's not great, I don't think. If you're wondering, one, I'd say the weather station. The weather station is a really cool base, but it's probably among the worst bases you can pick, because you have a workbench there, sure, and ptarmigans respawn a lot as you get a lot of ptarmigans, but that's it. That's it. There's nothing else to it, because everything else is far away from it. It's in a very inaccessible place. There's only one way up. There's multiple ways down, so if you're leaving the base, you can go down and then you can kill the bear and the moose. But then when you gotta go up again, you gotta go all the way around. It's like almost like it's equivalent to camping on the summit. So it's not a good base at all. It's a cool base, but it's not a practical one. So yeah. So that is, my friends, the tier list. And I think I'm fairly happy with this. I think it's a pretty good tier list. And I think it's pretty accurate as well. There are some leeway here, though. I'm not sure if all of them belong where they are. They might go up one or down. I do think that Timberwolf Mountain is probably the only S tier region in the game, because everything you need is so accessible. It is so easy to get to. Well, the A tier ones also have all of it, but they got some sort of drawback. Well, the B tier, they're alright, you know, depends on how you do it. C tier, survivable to a certain degree, but depends. D tier, just avoid it. But again, you can easily survive in all of these regions. All of these regions are great, and if you really want to conquer this game, I highly recommend that you try and survive 50 days in every region. You'll learn a lot from doing that, a lot, and you will become a better player, especially after evaluation. But if you're talking about what resources exist and which map is the best for long-term survival and that sort of thing, then this is the list, more or less. That being said, yeah, you can survive in Sundered Contamination just fine. And, you know, that is harder, just makes it more challenging, and maybe that's more fun, right? I'm not talking about what's fun, because it could be great to be in Sundered Contamination. Just, you know, it gives you an extra challenge, right? So it doesn't mean that this region is bad. It doesn't mean that Forlorn Muskeg is bad. No, we're just talking about what is the best one for long-term survival, and this, in my opinion, is pretty much what that looks like. Okay, fellow survivors, that's it for that ranking. Before you go, one more thing. If you watched this far, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I have a survey about regions and or your opinion on which region do you think is the best to survive in long term, and which region is best to spawn in, and so on. And I already started that survey. I posted it in my previous video, and I actually already have 1,000 replies. Wow, thank you so much. That's amazing. But you know what's even better than 1,000 replies? 2,000 replies. So if you haven't done it already, there's a link now on the screen. It'll be in the description as well. If you haven't filled out the survey, it takes you about 5 minutes. It's just a few questions like, you know, what's your favorite region and so on. If you can fill it out, it'd be great use. And I'm going to make a separate video talking about regions in general and what the community also says about them. That will probably be a long one, but that's okay. Okay, so that's it. If you can fill out the survey, fantastic. And if you watched all this, great. Also, please let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What is your opinion? And notice how this is different than the spawn. You know, it's a completely different approach to it. And yeah, that being said, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, survivors. And bye-bye.